Events like this are impossible without your support, so again, please join me in thanking the sponsors of the 2011 IAB Annual Meeting. And now it's my honor to introduce tonight's keynote speaker, Dr. Eric Schmidt. We're incredibly excited to have him here tonight to speak with us, and he'll also be taking questions from the audience. Please join me in welcoming Eric to the stage.
Hi. Thank you so much. Thank you all, and this is going to be an incredible conference. I'm so glad people could come back. Let me start by thanking Randall Rothenberg for coming back, right? Pretty good, pretty exciting. Helped build this, and a good partner for all of us. And we're obviously a very proud member of the IAB, and obviously what you guys are doing, what we're all doing together, makes a huge difference. Everybody here a fan of MSNBC Morning Joe, right? Joe Scarborough. Good guy, right? He talks of a world where computers offer a cold substitute to human contact. And he says that technology is winning the battle against actual human contact. I think he's wrong. I think he's way wrong. I think, in fact, the inverse is true. And that we're going to a world where humans do what humans do best, and computers will do what they do best. And what I want to talk about is the future of digital technology, of networks, of devices, and of advertising in that context. And I'm absolutely convinced that computers make a huge positive difference, and all the things that are occurring that we talked about in the opening keynote, and you'll be hearing for the next few days, are a net win for humanity. That this will allow us to spend more time with the people we care about, because it'll simplify our lives, to explore new places, and to make the world a better place, which I think is what life is all about. There are lots and lots of examples of this. In the issues in Egypt, a team from Twitter and Google put together in a weekend something called Speak to Tweet. So when they shut down the internet, always a mistake, right? People get on the phone and get their tweets out, right? This is the future. There's a company called Ushahidi that I particularly like because they use crowdsourcing. They use literally information on the street of wherever they are to figure out what's going on and in many cases make the world a better place. It started off in Kenya, given the abuses in the Kenyan election. You remember that in 2008? They were heavily used in the 2010 Haiti earthquake, and now they're working in Russian wildfires, floods in the Balkans, forest fires in Italy. There's a particularly interesting case where this kind of crowdsourcing technology is being used in the Sudan, where the actor George Clooney and a set of volunteers are monitoring what's happening in troop movements, because you could imagine that what the government says is not quite what's really happening on the ground, right? Welcome to the new world, where people are empowered and we find out what people are literally what's going on. Another example, improving our senses. An engineer at Google built an application, he happens to be colorblind for these Android phones, where you basically look through it and it makes the color correction so that a person who's colorblind can see colors the way they should have been. Think about what that means to them, right? This is what this technology allows. So the combination of the advent of smartphones and the development of wireless networks, now again in the United States with the rollout of LTE, 20 megabits on these relatively unloaded networks capable of up to 50 megabits, average download speeds of 10 megabits, you can have a lot of fun, right? There's a lot of stuff that you can do. With the back end of cloud computing, with the kind of computational power that we dreamed of for many, many years. The important thing is that all of us are making this possible because we're building the businesses that help pay for the servers, pay for the engineers, pay for the experiences, and provide tremendous shareholder value, as everybody here knows. So when I think about the next 10 years in advertising, I want to start by talking about what are consumers doing. They're spending more time online, right? It's interesting that there's an estimate that about a third of our media time is now online. In my world, it's 80%, but for the average American, it's about a third, and it's obviously growing pretty quickly. There are all sorts of interesting statistics. Those of you who have children, you've now determined that there are only two states of your child, sleeping and online, right? From the moment they're awake, they're online. So that's 16, 18 hours, whatever it is. And they're going to be consuming digital media, doing everything that they do. And again, these are our future. These are our future customers. This is our future businesses. And it's going to be very, very big. And it'll be true, of course, worldwide. Our current modeling indicates that within 5 years, more than 50% of the media consumption will be digital. And in fact, I'm old enough to remember that when color televisions came out, everybody said, oh, we have color. Well, it's going to get to the point where we don't have digital media, we just have media. And that's when we know we really won. From humble beginnings, all of us, right, trying to make the world a better place, trying to use this new technology in new ways, we're ultimately going to be the majority of the way advertising works and the way media works. It'll take a while, but it's clearly going to happen because it's a better model for all sorts of reasons. I think everybody knows that the smartphone is a defining cultural icon, the iconic device of our time. I had predicted last year it would take 2 years for the smartphones to surpass PCs, show you how wrong I am. They passed them 2 weeks ago. So the fact of the matter is and PCs are not going to catch up. If you look at all of the data that says in between tablets and mobile devices and applications, this is where people are going. I call this mobile first. The next generation of developers and partners and companies are being built with a mobile first approach. Build your application first for mobility for, again, these new devices, and figure out how to take advantage of the many, many interesting things that you can do with a phone or a tablet, like a GPS, right? So you know where people are. All of a sudden you can provide a better answer, a better service, and so forth and so on. Now, what do people do with phones? I was looking at the Super Bowl, right? Because it's obvious that the right way to do Super Bowl ads, right, is to preview them on YouTube ahead of time to create buzz. Furthermore, you should have a whole bunch of them and see which ones perform best, and then put that one in your expensive $3 million slot, right? It's obvious if you think about it because it reduces your risk and increases your return. Mobile searches on Chrysler spiked 102 times during the game, whereas their desktop searches only spiked 48 times, excuse me. For GoDaddy, of course, which is a well-known Super Bowl advertiser, mobile searches increased 315 times compared to 38 times on desktops. So we know now not only are people doing this YouTube essentially tested out model, but they're also now beginning to see the benefits on their mobile devices first. What else do people do? They shop, right? 78% of the smartphone internet users now are using their phones while they're shopping, right? And this was, of course, of great concern for retailers because they have all of this information. But this is the future, and everybody will adapt because people are fundamentally better off with a better and smarter and more empowered, if you will, customer. On and on and on. More than 200 million YouTube mobile playbacks per day. It's happening, and it's happening faster. We look at the charts internally, and it's happening faster than all of our predictions. So everything we talked about, and certainly in our opening, and everything you're going to hear about says, do mobile. So when I look at it from an advertising perspective, I see the union of the mobile device and advertising, and particular display advertising, as being the thing that's going to really revolutionize this. Now, the online display advertising industry is doing very well. We're all having good quarters and years and so forth, and the investments in a tough turnaround we all went through, we've emerged, every single person here in this room has emerged stronger and more focused as a result. It's all a good news story. It's interesting that online display advertising is growing faster than the overall markets. I've got example after example, and we have more and more major brand advertisers now moving to this. Pretty much every brand advertiser of any significance now has coherent and coordinated campaigns across display media because it works, because they can measure it, and because the technology has finally caught up with the promises that we talked about for so long. I was looking at how big could this market be. Current estimates, $62 billion business for online advertising, $26 billion in the United States. That gives you a sort of sense of the scale of this. And the online display advertising market, $17 billion and about $9 billion in the US. When I modeled it, started looking at the trends, using some of the assumptions that I'm sort of talking about, I concluded that the overall display advertising business can be a $200 billion business globally. So that gives you a sense of the scale of the market that we're all working into. There'll be many, many winners. We'll be one of them, but there'll be many others. There are lots of ways of playing in this, lots of ways of adding value as you focus on that value-added advertising of the customer, which is fundamentally about solving the problem they have, which is learning about a product and deciding to buy. If you solve that problem, you solve the advertiser problem, and you solve the publisher problem. And that's, again, the secret of our approach, as I'll take you through. Now, from our perspective, this all happened. We started with our acquisition of DoubleClick a few years ago, which turned out to be a very, very fortunate acquisition. We added YouTube, of course, Invite Media, Terracent, AdMob, other technology companies, as well as a lot of stuff that we built ourselves. And we're doing very, very well. We have more than 2 million publisher partners. And our ad exchange revenue is growing many hundreds of times. So all of a sudden now we've hit that sweet spot. We've figured out the tools and the technology that people need. And what's interesting is when I look at it, well, what's it going to take to go from our current sort of a couple of on the order of 10 billion, 20 billion kind of display businesses around all these companies that are represented in the room? How do we get to a $200 billion number? Okay, seems pretty obvious if I think about it. It's still too complicated to get a campaign up. It's just too hard. When you actually sit there and you talk to customers, and what they do is you say, like, show me how you do this. Well, I take from here, and I take from there, and I add a spreadsheet, and then I massage it a little bit by hand. Everybody recognize this? This is what our customers do? It's really a problem. We can automate this. If automation comes efficiency, comes scale, comes reach, and probably more revenue. One of the secrets here is that when you automate these processes, you can get greater value for what you're doing, you can operate it faster, and you get a scale effect. That's why this advertising businesses are likely to be very large. So in any case, you have to solve all of that. You have to solve measurement, right? Especially with top advertisers. And when you can figure out how to show the real conversion data, which again, we're on our way being able to do, and again, many companies involved in doing this, the advertisers will say, it's a no-brainer, right? I can measure it, here's what it costs, I know what I'm going to get, and I can get it in a very specific way. And the other thing that we need to do as an industry is give advertisers and publishers and users, of course, more choice and control. When you actually talk to them, they say, well, I want it this way. There's a reason why they want something slightly different. And as the technology matures, we'll be able to do all of that. So my suggestion would be to think of our approach as based on sort of three separate but interlinked bets. The first bet is that we're betting on everything changing. Now why? Because everything changes in our world all the time. Right? One of the most fundamental mistakes people make is they assume everything is static. But in fact, evidence is that everything changes all the time. New winners emerge, new platforms emerge, new technological ideas emerge. And our intuition about the future, this is a Ray Kurzweil quote, our intuition about the future is linear, but information technology grows exponentially. So that's why we're always surprised by this, because of compounding, because of the exponential nature of the curves that everybody is using. So an example would be that when you take the ad exchange that we've built and you rely on real-time data, you get a multiplier. You get more accurate data more quickly because we can do it in real time. You could never do this before, right? It's a big deal. You can also run cross-platform campaigns. In our case, we use Invite Media, which is our demand-side platform, and you can basically program all those cross-media campaigns. And now you can begin to say, I want one campaign and have the computer organize it around desktop, mobile, and tablet. And they'll find their natural growth rates. And we can debate whether mobile or tablet will be going faster than the desktop, but the fact of the matter is you want to be on all three, right? Seems obvious. And you want to let the market decide, and you want to participate in all three. Whatever your users are getting, that's what you want. And the key insight that you have to do is you have to be able to come up with the sort of the nub of how to approach advertising. So what happens is, you have the measurability and you have the reach with the cross-site platforms. And then the final thing you need is you need the sort of the publisher solution where they can sort of do the testing, do the iteration. We're seeing publishers, they try something else, they try something else. They become better experts at our system than we are because they understand if they do this, the following thing happens. And they measure it and they do it every hour. And I think that this is the new online advertising model. It's very much a real-time world. It's very much an iterative world. It's no longer a press the button, go home, have a good time, see what happened in a week. It occurs literally live. And again, with time compression and the connectivity of people, this is going to be a very, very big deal. By betting on open and sort of choice, right, another key component of what we're doing, you can see this in lots of ways. For example, in Android, we have more than 300,000 activations per day. It looks like our market share is #1 now, beating the iPhone. It looks like that's going to continue. The Chrome browser, another huge success for us, 120 million users, growing as fast as Twitter. So all of a sudden, the openness is beginning to resonate with our users and partners. With our ad exchange, right, it's open to anybody. You can just connect to it. It's all published. Just connect up your computer, and off you go. We have more than 50 ad networks today. And one of the characteristics is that when you have more advertisers into these ad networks, you get more revenue as a publisher. Because again, you get the benefit of the exchange. You get the benefit of a more efficient market. And a lot of people are concerned, well, I do that, and I go, well, what happens to all my differentiation? You get your differentiation in reach and scale because you understand your customer better and you have a more targeted solution. This is a fundamental insight in how these markets grow. And all of a sudden, we can play these games and we can actually figure out what really, really works at the scale that's been impossible before. So what's interesting is that when we talk to publishers, the publishers who have been selling their ad exchanges by the exchange are typically tripling their revenue. So the early data says that this is good for revenue in addition to good for other things like reach and user choice and so forth and so on. Another example of something that we did is we announced something called OnePass. And OnePass is a mechanism as a publisher where you can basically subscribe to, basically the customer, the end user, can pay in either a monthly subscription or a per unit thing to purchase your digital media. We started on this with newspapers because we figured that they needed a monetization engine. But in fact, digital goods will be sold, in our view, through mechanisms like OnePass. It's early on in that product since our announcement of 2 weeks ago. But it looks like it's going to be very, very successful. Another thing that we're really focused on is about end users. Let me give you an example. We've never in our industry fundamentally solved the problem of mass market engagement. You fundamentally want people to engage in the product in a way that's both personal and scalable in the market. It has to feel unique, but it has to grow quickly. That's how, again, these businesses work. An example would be, going back to my favorite subject of the moment, the Super Bowl ads. Volkswagen had a very successful ad on the Super Bowl, right? Everybody knows this, everybody saw it. What happened, of course, was they tested it out on YouTube ahead of time, right? And they generated a lot of, they did it a week before, generated a lot of consumer interest ahead of the Super Bowl buy. When they showed the Super Bowl thing, all of a sudden there was this huge community of interest. So I was looking at this, 61,000 tweets, 595,000 Facebook comments from one ad. That's reach, that's scale, that's momentum, that's creating a buzz, that's a new form of awareness, right? It used to be that you just had the beautiful ad that was really interesting by some very clever creative person. No longer. Now you have to figure out a way to get the social media campaign to match to the traditional mechanism, and we can measure it. And we can link the two, which I think is where the real promise for all of this stuff is. In parallel, returning to my comment about mobility, remember I said that what you fundamentally want is you want to solve the mobile phone problem, because that's where everybody's going to be, right? Mobile phones and tablets. Well, the same principle that I just described earlier can be applied using what we call hyperlocal ads, where you take an ad similar to what I'm talking about, and you put it into a local context. Now, how do you know where you are? There's a GPS. There's geo-positioning on all these devices. You know where you are, right? You certainly know what sort of general district you are in. A couple of examples. Or a good example would be Radio Shack. So when you click on the Radio Shack ad, not only does it tell you where the local Radio Shack is, it actually tells you where you are, where it is, and how to get there, in case there was any question as to whether they wanted you to go to their store. Of course they want you to go to their store. That's how they sell the product, and the quickest way for revenue. And what will happen, of course, using Radio Shack as an example, is this new generation of phone has this chip called the NFC chip. And the NFC chip is technically called a secure element. It allows you to keep a highly secure number, which it can use for authentication. It's much more secure than, for example, credit cards. So what will happen in this hypothetical case with Radio Shack is, in addition to telling you to go, when you get there, you'll be able to, the phone will tell you what to buy, and you'll be able to tap and pay. You'll never even have to get your purse or your wallet out, and off you go, right? And you can imagine similar things when you're wandering around these cities and so forth. The phone will know enough about you. Again, this is all with your permission. I need to say that about 100 times. You have to opt in for all these things. Basically, you're going to go in and you're going to say you need some new pants or you need, some new whatever. It can actually say, well, there's a store on the left and there's a store on the right. The store on the left has a 20% discount for you right now, and the one on the right has a 30% discount for you right now, but you don't like that brand. But because, in your case, you want the cheaper brand or what have you, or you want the better discount, you turn right, and that offer is for you right there in the store. You tap and pay, and off you go. Think about the implications for that, for advertising, targeted offers. There's this huge explosion now with essentially this offers mechanism. As the offers get tied to your position, your location, your mobile device, the explosion in commerce, right, the things that we can all drive as a group in terms of consumer behavior and basically solving the problem consumers have, which is I want to buy something, I want it to happen quickly, and I want to get exactly the right product that I want right now, we can do it. We spent 20 years getting to the point where we could pull this off, and we're finally there. People want control, by the way. In addition to with your permission, I'll give you an example. With YouTube, we introduced this thing called TrueView. What you do is you watch the video, and if you skip past the ad, right, we won't charge the advertiser unless the person watches the whole ad. So again, finding that balance between user and advertiser seems to be working as we can measure this and track these things. There's this whole issue around privacy and control. So we have a thing called Ad Preferences Manager. You can basically decide what kind of ads you want, or you can opt out of the entire system. This is the future for how people will solve a lot of these privacy and other concerns. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to sort of give you a sense of the union of mobile devices, clouds, and networks, as well as what you could do with advertising. I want to take one more minute to talk about what does the world look like as a result of this. And I want you to imagine a world in the very near future with some of these properties. I was thinking about this as I was driving here. Computers are very good at remembering things. You never need to forget anything. Your computer will remember it. They remember, you don't. And because it's so personal, and because you'll want it to remember, it really will. And again, this is either now or a few years from now, but it's not that far away, certainly in all of our lifetimes. And by the way, another thing is, you're never lost. Right? I remember the joy of being lost, wandering around trying to figure out where I was. Right? No one is ever lost anymore because you'd never turn off that device. So all of a sudden, we know where you are, and we know, and you can also predict where you want to go and all those kinds of things. It's a very, very different world. And what's interesting now is because of cloud computing and because of dynamic translation, and I should say that we and other corporations are working on 100 by 100 language translation, literally every language into every other language dynamically using something called statistical translation. So all of a sudden, you really can know pretty much everything. Of course, the information overload is a huge issue. But the fundamental fact that you went from sort of an elite that could only read one language, especially if you're in a narrow language, to the situation where you can read pretty much everything is a major, major change in society, which I think is overwhelmingly positive. But with that overload comes this question of how do I spend my time? But computers now, because of various forms of collaborative filtering and other AI techniques which are emerging, can actually suggest to you what the most important thing is based on who you are, again, with your permission, and based on what you care about and who your friends are and so forth and so on. We can actually suggest what the most important thing for you is to do right now, to pay attention to. I don't know about you, but I'm completely overloaded in between Twitter this and Facebook that and all the Google activities and all the email and everything else, and plus the phone actually rings occasionally. Like, how do I spend my time, right? The answer is the computer can help me. Now, as a consequence, I don't think you're ever lonely anymore because there's always something to do, somebody to talk to, and you're certainly never bored. And my generation spent all of their time worrying about people were going to waste their time watching television. Well, now you can waste time watching the internet, right? So it's the same principle. But the fact of the matter is people can use these devices now to spend time doing the things that they care about, which is ultimately an end user point. You're never out of ideas because there's always something new to learn. If you're intellectually curious, as I am, and I suspect all of you are as well, there's an infinite potpourri of things that you care about, that you didn't know about, that you wish you'd learned about in high school, or whatever, that you care about right now. And of course, your car drives it yourself, but we'll ignore that. What I like the most about this future, of all of the things that I've talked about, is that information, which is the business that we are in, that I'm certainly in, and many of us, I think all of us are in now, has fundamentally been businesses about elites. It's always been about how difficult it was to get information, or it only covered English speakers, or only the wealthier West, or the emergent East, or the powerful and rich. This is a vision that covers everyone. It does not discriminate based on the amount of money you have. As long as you have some kind of a mobile device or some way to get on this internet, and in fact, over the next few years, it looks like between 1 and 2 billion people who've never been connected are going to get connected to this world. And we're going to find out a lot about them. We're going to find out what languages they speak and the things that they care about. And do they really care about Britney Spears as much as we do? Or do they care about something else? We don't know. But to me, the thing that I'm proudest of is that working together, we have made it possible to build industries, and I mean large industries, that can deliver information to billions of people who would never have been able to do it. With that, thank you very much. I think we have time for a few questions. I think we have some floor mics on this or on anything else. We have some folks here with microphones, and we have people raising their hands. Yes. Okay. We'll get started. Go ahead.
Hi, Eric Martin Nissenholtz.
Yes, hi Martin, nice to see you.
Nice to see you as well. Can you comment on the emergence of native apps and the idea that there now seems to be a growing, almost a kind of storefront, well, it is a storefront for proprietary applications versus the web? I mean, do you see it as a closed versus open world, or do you see something else?
Let's make the case for closed apps, and then let's tell you why I disagree with it, for obvious reasons. I think that folks who are building these powerful apps are doing a tremendous job. If you look at their success, if you look at the focus around the platforms, they essentially have limited choices that are presented particularly well, which is counter to the way the web works. In particular, what's happened very, very well with apps has been the monetization solutions. And again, so you see pioneering monetization, curated content, and those sorts of things. The fundamental issue with closed systems is eventually the world finds them limiting. That is a fundamental problem. It's why the web has been so successful. And speaking as on the web side, I would criticize the web folks by not recognizing the need for such beautifully curated user interfaces and content and so forth. So I think it's a good debate, closed versus open, which is indeed the way I see it. So what does the open community need to do? Well, partly the reason the closed apps world has been so successful is their problem is technically simpler. It's a proprietary interface. Let's go through the list. Same, one hardware, one OS, one set of APIs, one programming language, one platform, one monetization mechanism, and fundamentally one marketplace in most cases. So it's an easier problem. It's an easier problem technically, it's an easier problem, business problem. But ultimately the world does not like those sorts of models. Ultimately the world prefers more choice, more openness. And so by learning what worked well there and by improving the underlying technology with which one builds web apps, it should be possible to get all of the benefits of what we're, for purposes of discussion, we'll call the closed app model, but the scale of the world. So it's a scale argument, and ultimately scale wins. It will take a little while. There are people today who are building applications which dynamically can sense whether they're inside of one container or another, and then they configure themselves into one or the other, and my guess is that's how it'll work itself out. So for people who are building content like yourselves, it should be possible for you to have one content, press a button, and it goes to both streams, which is, I think, is ultimately what you want. Some more questions.
Hi, back on the other side. Other way. There we go.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Zach Colias. I'm with a company called Trigit. We're a DSP. We buy on your exchange. We love what you guys are doing. We've been drafting off you for 2.5 years now and are very, very happy with where you're going with the exchanges. But the question I have is that traditionally marketplaces have been either controlled by the participants or by some neutral third party, and Google is neither. As the exchange scales and as it tends towards a natural monopoly because of what it does in terms of raising prices for publishers and bringing in more buyers in a very virtuous circle, as you described earlier, it creates a lot of interesting conflicts. How does Google anticipate dealing with some of those conflicts?
I disagree with one part of your question, because I don't believe that there will only be one exchange. I think the evidence is that there will be multiple exchanges, and the reason is that it does not solve to a single unitary problem. This is not like stock trading where there's an efficiency by having one price, one solution. So it does not have a natural network effect. You get a certain amount of benefit of scale, which is what I am talking about, but at some point you run out of that because there's other aspects of the way customers use things and so forth, which prevents you from growing above a certain sort of market share, if you will. So I disagree with the premise there. I think from our perspective, the other comment I would make is that the evidence right now is that this has been a good deal, the exchange has been a good deal for both publishers and advertisers because of reach. That fundamentally, publishers want more more customers, if you will, of reading or consuming their digital media, and the advertisers want more advertisers. And I think as long as that's the case, this thing's going to work just fine. So I'm not too worried about the dominant position, monopoly kind of argument in this case. I just think it's going to happen.
Hi, Lauren Brown from Operative. We sat here about a year ago and talked about what it would take to get brands online, and we talked a lot about getting more creative. I think Bob Carrigan mentioned that, hire engineers. We talked about new metrics, sort of getting beyond the impression and things like that, reorganizing sales teams to, meet the new demands of brands. And you certainly talked a lot about Google's products today, and seemingly that would seem to cater more to the direct marketers that are out there. So I'd be interested in your view. Can companies that are in the data space, the DSP space, the networks and exchanges, really be influential in helping brands come online, and what your view is on that?
I guess I've always believed that brands are earned by end user product success. In other words, that a brand is set by the quality of the product and how you experience it. So in the display case, the way you win is by showing why your brand is different or better. And we have the underlying technology now in our authoring tools and our measurement tools for you to detect what works and what doesn't. So if you view the world with an analytical eye, which is how we view the world, you wouldn't ask it quite the way you described it. What you would say is, how do I make sure that the thing that makes my product better, literally the branding of it, the unique aspects, whether it's quality or excitement or specialization or it's a horizontal brand that everyone uses. How can I show that off? And you can measure the two. So brand advertising, in my view, can in fact be tracked and measured, just like the more traditional analytical cases using those sorts of tools. Yes, ma'am, go ahead. Yes, sir.
Eric, Dave Morgan from Simul Media.
Yes, hi, Dave.
So you talked a lot about what's happened on the PC, and a lot of what you see that's going to happen on the mobile devices and the tablets, and the capacity, the potential for a 200 billion market. What about the TV? It's obviously an area where you've all put a lot of work in, and it's pretty much almost a $200 billion global market today in advertising. Can you tell us a little bit about how you see that evolving?
Well, I think people here know we have two products in this space that are doing quite well. The first is essentially a television, an ads product where we insert ads into satellite feeds. And again, because of measurability with a set-top box, we can give you analytics that traditional television cannot do. And we have lots of interesting results about what ads work and what ads won't work by using the information on the set-top box. So one way to think about your set-top box is it's a fully addressable computer, addressable by one end and not by you, right? That's sort of the way they were built out. And that looks like it's going to be a very significant market. The barriers to entry there have all to do with the way the television advertising industry's sort of technology works. The ad insertion, the way TV ads actually are stuck, if you will, into the feeds and so forth is somewhat draconian, and will take a while to work on, but we're working on that. The second initiative we have is a product basically known as Google TV, which is essentially a piece of software based on Android that is embedded in a television. And it's very controversial because it's the first time that people have taken a television and the characteristics of a full-featured browser and combined them in a television. One of the TV industry executives who I was speaking with said, with this sort of tremendous excitement in voice, very upset, said, "Do you realize that you're taking a dumb television and making it smart?" And I said, "Yeah, that's what we're doing. You figured it out." So that has a lot of implications for the business model and so forth, but ultimately, an interesting statistic is that about 55% of people who are watching television have a second screen that they're watching at the same time, whether it's typically a mobile phone or a tablet or a gaming console. So this is happening, right? The people are doing multiple things at once. The old traditional television model seems to be going away, replaced by it. And we argue that people will watch more television because it's more interactive, they have more choices and so forth. And that will be a big advertising opportunity as we figure out how to target those. So those are two. The issue with television has been that the addressability of the device has always been an issue. But now with these powerful IP-based set-top boxes plus Google TVs and its competitors as they come out, we should be able to get the same ROI as we do in traditional text and display advertising. And that's in America, that's at least a $50 billion market, depending on how you count it. Yeah, let's see, some more comments. Yes, over here. Yes, sir.
Mark Bernstein with Kelly Blue Book.
Yes, hi.
Congratulations, by the way, on your new role and,
Thank
your
you.
new focus. And
Looks like the same job.
Yeah.
Same activities.
Best of luck with that.
Yeah, good.
On
All
that
good.
note, I'm curious to see if you think the industry can do enough to regulate the use of data and the consumer privacy, especially with the massive growth there has been in vendors and companies that have access to that data and are monetizing that data. Can we do enough as an industry to police that before government or congressional oversight? If not, how do you see the government and Congress addressing this, and could it be very draconian where the data is just gone, or do you think that the industry will do enough?
Well, we had better get our act together, because the regulations look pretty, when you actually see the initial draft of the regulations, you go, oh my God, right? So I think it's a message to all of us to pay attention and behave, right? And if we sat down and we said, like, what are the things that make you squeamish about what's going on in our industry? We would all agree on that list. Stop doing it. Try to respect the privacy of the advertiser, the privacy of the end user. Don't misuse their personal data. Use opt-in wherever possible. A set of guidelines, they're all pretty obvious if you think about it in that context, and I think we can get through it. There are a number of companies, Google is just one of quite a few, that are working very hard on these industry-led initiatives to get ahead of the concern. And I'm always concerned about government regulation coming in early and choking off opportunities. Because what happens is they write the rule, and maybe it's well-intentioned, they write the rule for the problem at hand. It's perfectly reasonable, we all agree to it, but then the way it was written prevents 5 years from now some huge innovation that technology allows that we cannot foresee today. So premature regulation can really stoke off an entire industry. We want to make sure that by good behavior of all of us, we can make sure that there's no need for that. More questions?
Hi.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Tom Kelly with AOL.
It's high time.
As CEO of Google, you've purchased quite a few companies over the last year or two. How are you finding that to work, and how are you finding the right balance of allowing the companies in which you've purchased to thrive while also providing those companies with the same powerful tools that Google has, and sort of finding that positive sync that works best for all parties?
Thank you for that. I think we distinguish between small companies and large companies. We've done a relatively small number of large company acquisitions for numerous reasons, and those ones all require a very large amount of work with them, try to determine, for example, should they operate independently, as we did with YouTube. In the case of DoubleClick, for example, we ultimately decided to make that the basis for our display advertising business, and we expanded it to sort of become much of our advertising. So again, each one is different. For the smaller acquisitions, you can think of them as largely acquisitions for talent, because you're buying a team that's very sharp, typically engineering-led, which again, Google's a product-based company, and those are relatively straightforward, right? You make sure the folks are very focused, and the things that they're working on makes perfect sense. So overall, I would say the bigger acquisitions require a tremendous focus, because you're really not going to be able to change their culture. You're going to have to work with it. And the smaller ones, think of them as essentially just merging into that. And this will continue. I can't remember the number, we've been acquiring small companies very, very quickly, because it just gives us a leg up in terms of solving these end user problems that I was describing. It just literally occurs, that makes the product cycle faster. I want to be sensitive to time. Somebody should tell me when. Oh, yes. You want? Oh, yes. You want this to be the last question. Even better. Yes, sir.
Hi, Eric. Bo and Dwelly here with Ad Monsters. Thanks for being here. You put forward a $200 billion number as the potential size of the display ad market, which is, I'm sure that's exciting for everybody here. I'd love to hear, first of all, when you think that might come about. But more importantly, you said it's still too hard to get campaigns up, and that's the inhibitor, in terms of getting to that number. But I mean, I always like to think of things as in terms of enablers versus inhibitors, and so I'd like to hear your take on what you think, how we're going to get there. Is that a technology problem? Is it a complexity problem? Is it a scale problem, or is it an operations problem? And that's my role, operations. Thanks.
If you take a $30 billion business and you assume it doubles every year, you're at my number in 4-ish years, just because of compounding. I think that's an extreme case. I think it's going to be longer than that. But we're seeing growth rates in display that are not quite doubling, but you could imagine it could get there. So if you, one of the things that we typically do is we typically do not anticipate the multiplier from globalization, because everybody outside the United States wants the same sort of services. And so all the models I've seen don't account for that. So it's somewhere in the 5 to 10 year range would be my estimate, probably on the shorter end of that. So with respect to the barriers, one of the things that does bother me about what we do is I love teams of 5 programmers changing the world. The fact of the matter is every company that's doing these platforms is doing these with hundreds of engineers now, because these are very, very sophisticated platforms. They have very sophisticated user interfaces, very computationally intensive analytical frameworks, and they have to serve publishers and advertisers and end users with all these new devices and so forth. So the barrier to success in this, if you will, the asymptote of getting to where you need to go, is underlying technological complexity. And standardizing on, one of the things the IAB has done a particularly good job on is trying to standardize formats so that the industry can work on that. So the more that we as a group can establish standardized interchange formats, ads formats, publisher formats, and so forth, that accelerates and it avoids the duplication of effort that's characteristic of these large platforms. Thank you so much. I hope you guys have a great rest of the conference. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.